developmental dyscalculia is defined as a specific learning difficulty in the domain of math and more specifically arithmetic. Dyscalculia, a disability in calculation essentially. It's also a math difficulty that's persistent, that you can detect over multiple grade levels. So these children have great difficulties in catching up. There's something very strong holding them back. So we see kids obviously sometimes who have poor math skills in 1 year and then recover and then they're fine. What we're seeing with children with developmental dyscalculia is that they have these persistent difficulties, just like children with developmental dyslexia have persistent difficulties in reading. Developmental dyscalculia, we know a lot less about it than we know about developmental dyslexia. And I think one of the tragic things is that we don't have very good provisions for students with developmental dyscalculia. And we don't know the causes of it, but it must be a combination of both genetic and environmental factors that lead to the sort of atypical development of brain circuitry that underlies our ability to calculate. When children are born into this world, we think they already have some understanding of numerical quantity. But their understanding of numerical quantity is what we refer to as non-symbolic. That is, they don't yet have a symbol to represent the quantities, but they have some sense that, for example, there are more apples in one basket compared to another basket. Over the course of learning and development, they acquire cultural representations, numerical symbols to represent those quantities. And one critical step then in development and learning is achieving the mapping between this number symbol system and this pre-existing non-symbolic system. And we think that a lot of children who go on to have developmental dyscalculia struggle with this integration, struggle with making numerical symbols meaningful, going beyond just viewing them as abstract shapes or sounds to actually having rich, meaningful semantic representations of those symbols. The first study that linked number symbol processing to developmental dyscalculia, so trying to understand what underlies their arithmetic difficulties, used a very interesting task. What happens in this task is I show you two numbers, but in addition to varying their numerical magnitude, I vary their physical size. And so I might have a very large 1 and a very small 9, or a very large 9 and a very small 1. And children either have to focus on number by telling you which one is numerically larger or which one is physically larger. These researchers, this was Karen Lundell, Bevan and Brian Butterworth at University College London in the early 2000s, breakthrough study. What they were able to show was when they compared children with and without developmental dyscalculia as well as children with developmental dyscalculia and dyslexia, was that all groups were equally fast when they had to adjust the physical size, when they didn't have to access the meaning of the numbers. But as soon as you asked them to judge the numerical size, you saw this massive reaction time difference between children without and with developmental dyscalculia. One theory is that what children with developmental dyscalculia have is a generalized magnitude processing deficit. So even if they have to compare lengths of lines or heights of bars or intensity of tones, they would have difficulties with that as well. And that's something that's still very much in its infancy. The other one is spatial abilities. And we know, of course, that spatial understanding and math are linked to one another, and that in math education and instruction we use space as a metaphor for numbers. The other thing is dyslexia. Dyslexia and developmental dyscalculia often co-occur. There's a high degree of what we refer to as comorbidity of developmental dyscalculia and dyslexia. And one of the hallmarks of dyscalculia is the inability to retrieve facts from memory. And we and others have shown that phonological awareness is really important in math achievement. It correlates very highly with particularly arithmetic and particularly with fact retrieval. So maybe there's some linkages there as well.